Picture a 17-year-old. Now picture their mouth. The teeth are worn flat, cracked, chipped down to almost nothing. If you handed that jaw to a dentist today and asked them to guess the age, they'd say 80, 90, some old person who never once picked up a toothbrush. Except this kid was 17. And here's the part that should stop you. They weren't unlucky. They were normal. Out of 26 of these individuals that got studied, only about 4 in 10 had teeth you could call halfway okay. The rest, ground down. Some of them were children, under 10 years old, already walking around with a wrecked mouth. The oldest one anybody found made it to 25, and that was the record. That was ancient. That was the village elder. So let me ask you the question this whole thing is really about. If you had to be born again, but into the single worst moment to ever be a human, when would that be? You might go for a plague year, the Black Death maybe. You might guess some grim stretch of history where life was short and everything hurt, and you wouldn't be totally wrong. Life used to be brutal. In 18th century France, people averaged around 27 to 30 years. Classical Greece, about 25. The Bronze Age, 26. Go back to the Neolithic and it drops to something like 20. But those are all us, Homo sapiens, modern humans. And honestly, compared to some of the other humans who came before us, we've had it easy, almost embarrassingly easy. The answer to the question isn't a century, it's a species. It lived around 2 million years ago, and it was called Homo habilis. How short were their lives? On average, best guess, about 12 years. 12. That's roughly 6 times shorter than the 73 or so years a person can expect today. And it's probably worse than that, because the study that came up with 12 was working from 26 skeletons that were weirdly missing newborns and infants, the group that dies the most. Add them back in, and that already tiny number gets smaller. So no, not a plague, not a war, not some cursed decade. If you want the worst human life on record, you want to wake up as a Homo habilis. Let me walk you through why it was that bad, because every time you think you've hit the bottom of it, there's another floor. Start with the thing you'd be living inside. Your own body would be working against you. Habilis was tiny. We're talking under 4 feet tall on average, about 1.20 meters. That's roughly a third shorter than you, and even on a good day they carried maybe 60% of your body weight. Small. And not small like a gymnast, all coiled muscle. Just small and breakable, because they didn't have thick, heavy-duty bones to make up for the lack of size. Nothing reinforced. Now put that fragile little frame up in a tree, because that's where a lot of their life happened. They were partly arboreal, half at home in the branches. Which sounds nice until you remember what living in trees actually involves. Chimps, who are genuinely good climbers, still take at least one nasty fall in their lives. Habilis climbed worse than chimps, so a serious fall was pretty much part of the package. They were one of the earliest members of our line, kicking around from about 2.3 to 1.65 million years ago, and they still looked pretty apish. Longish arms, hands and feet built to grip a branch and swing. Useful traits if the story ended there. It doesn't. Here's where you'd think you'd catch a break. Small tree-dwelling primate, right? So it probably nibbled leaves and fruit and kept its head down. It didn't. Not even close. Habilis was a serious meat eater. One of the meatiest diets we've seen in any human, actually. You can read it right off the skull. Big front teeth for slicing through flesh, and a jaw thicker than any living ape or human, built to crank out enough force to tear meat off a carcass. They ate plenty of fruit and plants too, sure, but it was the meat that ruined them, because meat meant leaving the trees, on the ground, out in the open, again and again. They even had a thing for fish, which parked them right at the edge of the water. Hold that thought, the water matters later. The meat was one problem, how they got it was another. They scavenged. This little animal, weak, 4 feet tall, armed with nothing but simple stone tools, made its living walking up to dead bodies out on the African plains. One group of researchers ran the numbers and figured that at their absolute best, a group of habilis could maybe hold a carcass against jackals and cheetahs. That's the ceiling. Jackals. And their neighborhood was a nightmare. East and South Africa, packed with big carnivores that all wanted the same corpses they did, and were more than happy to eat the scrawny scavenger as a bonus. When people went looking, they turned up more than 30 animals from that time and place that could plausibly have hunted a habilis. 30. So think about your options if you're one of these things. Something's coming for you. What do? You run, you climb, you get in the water, you fight, or you outsmart it. 5 escape routes. Let me show you how every last one was closed. Your first instinct is up a tree. Makes sense, you're built for it, sort of, and most animals can't follow. Except one of the animals hunting you was Macaritus, and Macaritus was one of the largest cats that ever existed. Some of them hit 405 kilos, nearly 900 pounds, which puts them right up there with Smilodon and a big male polar bear. A single swipe from something that size ends you, and they seem to have gone after the young ones especially. Now you'd think a cat that heavy couldn't climb after you. True, but its legs were short, too short for a long chase, which meant it didn't chase, it jumped. Powerful, explosive jumps straight up. So the tree, your safe spot, your whole plan, gone. And that's before we get to Meganterion, jaguar-sized saber-tooth, and it was around for basically the entire run of Homo habilis, so there was no era where you got a break from it. Heavier than a jaguar, with lower legs the size of a lion's, ending in these massive paws full of hooked claws. Once it had you pinned, you got to meet the teeth. The quick version, the merciful one, is the canines going into your throat, cutting the arteries and the nerves, and you're gone in a few seconds. The other version is worse, and we know it happened because we found the skull, a habilis with puncture marks on the back of its head. And when they checked the angle of the bite, the cat hadn't come from behind, it came from the front, which means it took the entire human head into its mouth. That can kill you a couple of ways, crushing the skull or just clamping over your nose and mouth until you can't breathe. And Meganterion ate so many of these people that you can literally see it in their body chemistry, in the carbon isotopes. Of everything hunting habilis, it was the biggest human killer of the bunch. Oh, and there were other cats, Dinofelis right there alongside them, hunting. Homotherium too, with shorter, broader canines edged in wavy little serrations, so its bite punctured and sliced you at the same time. Nice. Fine, forget the tree, just run, meet Pachycrocuta, one of the biggest hyenas that ever lived, about the size of a lioness, with a bone-crushing bite that ranks among the strongest pound for pound of any land mammal ever. And cracking bone isn't just a party trick. It meant Pachycrocuta could get at the marrow inside, so it showed up at the exact same carcasses habilis was trying to scavenge. It probably ran in packs, and hyenas, then like now, don't always bother killing you first. A lot of the time they just start eating while you're awake. Then there's Chasmoporthetes, which was smaller and somehow more of a problem. This was one of the dog-like hyenas, lean and quick, moving in packs. You might hear smaller and relax. Don't. A pack of fast little hyenas taking you apart is not the upgrade it sounds like. And its legs were built like a cheetah's for flat-out speed, which earned it the nickname the running hyena. Habilis? Not a runner. Decent stamina over distance maybe, on a good day. That's it. On top of everything, these things were hyper-carnivores, over 70% of their calories from meat. With teeth edged like a big cat's, you were not going to outrun that. Remember the fish? Remember how they waded in to grab them? By hand? No spear, no rod, just reaching into the water? Yeah, about that. The rivers and lakes had giant crocodiles in them. Same family as the crocs alive today, the genus Crocodilus, but you would never mistake one for a modern croc, because these were enormous. The worst of them for a human had the perfect name, Crocodilus anthropophagus. The anthropophagus part means man-eater, and it earned it. We've got 2 young habilis with heavy damage to their legs and feet that matches this croc's teeth exactly. The pattern tells the story. It ambushed them, went for the legs first, dragged them in, and then either drowned them or did a death roll to twist the limb clean off. Which is what happened to both of those kids. This thing ran about 7.5 meters, 25 feet, weighed around 1.5 tons, wore heavy armor, and was bigger than a modern saltwater croc. For scale, Lolong, the largest crocodile anyone's measured in modern times, was 6 meters and about 1.1 tons. Anthropophagus beat that, and it had 2 ridges over its eyes like a pair of horns, in case it needed to look the part too. And it wasn't even the biggest. That title goes to Crocodilis thorbjarnarsoni, a slightly older croc that overlapped with the early habilis. Around 8 meters, 26 feet. The largest Crocodilus species ever dug up, and one of the biggest true crocodiles, full stop. It had this unusually broad skull, maybe for gripping and crushing armored stuff like big turtles, but it wasn't picky. It ate what it could catch. And this is the part that stings. The single most important habilis fossil we have, the holotype, the specimen the whole species is defined by, is a skeleton called OH7. And OH7 may have died exactly like this. Its foot and leg bones carry deep, broad puncture wounds that match a giant croc, and like the others, it looks like OH7 lost the limb and lost its life in one attack. But it gets more unfair, because OH7 also has shallow grooves on the top of its skull, and those don't match a crocodile at all. They match the bite of a leopard-sized cat. So this one poor individual might have been hit by a croc and a cat both. We can't even tell if the cat bite came before it died or after. That's the founding member of the species. That's the one they named everybody else after. Let's say you dodged the giants. Congratulations! Now worry about everything smaller and quieter. Plenty of the predators around them are still with us. Leopards and lions, wild dogs, big birds of prey, and snakes. Snakes might be the quiet reason so many of these lives ended early. There's no fossil of a habilis snakebite, obviously. Soft tissue doesn't stick around. But we know snakes in early humans have never gotten along. Snakes still kill tens of thousands of people a year in Africa alone, mostly the venomous ones. And for certain groups living deep in the forest today, constricting snakes are the single leading cause of death. Some researchers think snakes pressured our ancestors so hard that they shaped how we see, sharpening our vision to catch a camouflaged one in the leaves. Primates might even be born wired to fear them. So yes, habilis got bitten, and habilis got squeezed. And not everything that killed them even had fangs. The place was full of grumpy, territorial plant eaters and omnivores. Ancient rhinos, hippos, giant warthogs, elephants, giraffes, big wild cattle. They didn't hunt habilis, they just didn't want it around. And a 2-ton animal that wants you gone doesn't need to want to eat you. Even now, African herbivores and omnivores kill a few thousand people a year without really trying. Not everything that shortened these lives had teeth of its own. Some of it was just grind. Go back to that wrecked 17-year-old mouth from the start. That wasn't bad luck. That was the menu. A steady diet of meat, bone, and gritty, tough plants sands your enamel down to nothing over the years. And because habilis was small and near the bottom of the pecking order, it rarely got first crack at a carcass. It ate the leftovers, whatever was still on the bone, whether that was any good for its teeth or not. When you're that far down the line, you don't get to be choosy. Then the weather turned on them. This was the Pleistocene, and the African climate went through these violent mood swings, getting colder and much drier, and food that was already scarce got scarcer. Sometimes it tipped over into flat-out starvation. As things got worse, habilis leaned even harder on scavenging just to stay fed, which threw them in front of even more predators. Predators who were now also hungry and desperate and a lot less patient. The bad thing fed the other bad thing. Okay, last resort. You can't run, climb, swim, or fight your way out. So be clever. Stick together. Use your big human brain. Problem is, the competition included other humans, and they were better at all of it. Habilis bones show up in the same ground as 3 other Homo species and another hominin cousin: Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, Homo rudolfensis, and Paranthropus boisei. We've got at least one Paranthropus that a habilis killed, maybe even 8, so give habilis that one win, but against the other Homo, it was outgunned. It was the smallest of them and the worst suited to life on the ground, so any fight down in the dirt was played on the other guy's home field. Worse, it had close to the smallest brain of any human ever, somewhere between 500 and 687 cubic centimeters, roughly a quarter smaller than Ergaster, the next smallest brain in the room. Erectus could be running around with double the brain size. And you can see that gap in what they built. Erectus had controlled fire, picks, knives, cleavers. Habilis had simple stone tools. Put those two in a standoff and it isn't a fair fight. One more for the pile, and this one isn't even a human. Dinopithecus, a giant relative of the baboon, kitted out with big fangs and a lot of muscle, and possibly 3 times the size of a habilis. So sure, throw a monster ape onto the list of things that might kill you before your teens. Let me put a number on how doomed this was. The original study found that the worst stretch of a habilis life started around age 10, the window where death rates peaked. But just reaching 10 already made you one of the lucky ones. About 40% of them died before they hit double digits. Fold the infants and juveniles back in, and that climbs to 60%. 6 in 10, gone before 10. Which again is why that average of 12 is almost certainly generous. Here's the thing that always gets me though. If this species was such a walking disaster, how did it hang on from 2.3 million to 1.65 million years ago? That's not a blip, that's over 500,000 years. Part of it was the tools. Cracking bones open for marrow and processing tough plants let them squeeze calories out of a landscape that didn't offer many, and that matters when you're starving. There's also a windbreak, a rough little shelter dated to about 1.7 million years ago that might be theirs. If it is, it means some of them had figured out a way to push back against the cold. They lasted a long, long time, and they still lost. Maybe that's the whole story right there, that the dying just never eased up, and eventually it was more than even 85 of them could carry. So the next time your worst problem is a train that's late or a phone that died, spare a thought for that 12-year-old with the ruined mouth who never met a grandparent, because nobody in his world lived long enough to be one. Who woke up every single day with 4 different kinds of animal ready to kill him 4 different ways, and who was one bad harvest away from starving anyhow. That wasn't his unlucky week, that was his whole life, and it was the whole life of his entire kind, for 1,000,000 years. Being a Homo habilis was about as hard as being human has ever gotten.